Hello and welcome back, and today we're going to do a hardware review of the brand new QNAP TS-873A. It is their brand new ext4 and ZFS equipped 8-bay for SMB users, small, medium business. Now, it utilises that Ryzen CPU that we've been talking about a heck of a lot over the last 12 months. It also arrives with a few very system unique angles on it, and I've got to say, very early doors, and again I've got a full review below, this is probably one of the most mature releases from QNAP that I've seen in about 2 to 3 years. Let me explain. A lot of the solutions that I've seen from QNAP over the years are very kind of hardware focused. They'll come out and go, right, it's an Intel i7 and we've bunged on a couple of 10G ports and we've got HDMI out and we've bunged on some Thunderbolt as well for good measure. We've stuck on some U2s and just basically turned it into this behemoth of a device that arrives on the market, and it's either too expensive or people look at the solution and go, oh, that's very good, I'm going to use like 30% of that. And although some of those solutions are very, very desirable to people that work in, say, video production, 4K, stuff like that, broadcasting, content creation, virtualization, stuff like that, a number of mid-level businesses just want a solution where their data can live. They want to use all the software to create a backup options. They want to have a system that can grow with them. And ultimately, they're not looking for some massive powerhouse, aggressive, knock your bloody eyes out solution. They are looking for a robust, competent and reliable solution. And in this is where I've seen some of the best work from QNAP, particularly in the hardware architecture, where we see both elements of restraint and we see excellence in a number of ways. Is it perfect? Of course it's not. Certain things that I'm less pleased about will become apparent later in the video. But for now, let's talk about this device in terms of the hardware, outside, inside, talk about that software, and ultimately help you decide whether this deserves your data. So, arriving at a pinch higher price tag than the TS-873 that came before it. This is an x86 64-bit equipped NAS. It's not GPU embedded. It doesn't arrive with a CPU that's got integrated graphics or anything like that, but it makes up with it with a processor that is doing exceptionally well right now in 2020 to 2021. In terms of virtualization, in terms of surveillance, in terms of utilizing the entire arrangement of applications available, and quite impressively, it's one of the most modest CPUs I've seen for a long time that can utilize ZFS. The system arrives at boot. The choice of choosing the ext4 file system equipped QTS or the ZFS file system. I know I've just said the word file system there, get over it, zettabyte file system, QUTS Hero version of their software that's removed the volume layer, as you'd expect from a ZFS system. It also allows for improved RAID building, RAID rebuilding, RAID resyncing, resilvering, RAID scrubbing, all of that stuff in the background, with improved performance internally because you've removed volume containers from the equation. On top of that, it also allows you to take advantage of inline data compression. The idea that the amount of space taken up by data inside the system is analysed and space is saved with lots of statistical information readily available on the storage manager. On top of that, inline deduplication is on the table that allows you, when backing up from multiple sources, once the system can identify data is the same from multiple sources, it will only keep the one version of that file, maintaining a lot of saving space, but on top of that, it can actually speed up file processes as well. It's worth highlighting this device arrives with 8 gig of DDR4 memory that we'll talk about a little bit more in a second, but that memory, if you're going to take advantage of things like data deduplication along with a couple of other bits, you're going to want to ramp that memory up a bit to about 16 gig at least, although the system does arrive with support of up to 64 gig, which most systems I've seen that have taken advantage of that processor have said that they go up to a maximum 32 gig. It's only QNAP that have said it can go up to 64. I've not had a chance to look at the official spec sheets of the processor, but I do have videos coming up very, very soon where we will be installing a couple of Kingston 32 gig DDR4 modules and installing a couple of crucial DDR4 modules as well. We're going to be ramping this up to 32 gig and then up to 64 gig to see how the system handles it. Now, Back to that processor, it is a quad-core V1500B, that Ryzen embedded processor. The quad-core's at 2.2 GHz. Again, because it's a 64-bit x86 processor, you're going to be able to do all that stuff with graphics. Again, you're going to be able to host VMs, taking advantage of virtualization station, Linux station, and container station, or utilize it and connect it as via target to the likes of VMware, Hyper-V, stuff like that. There's also several surveillance options inside with the likes of Surveillance Station and, of course, QVR Pro and QVR Elite, with QVR Pro arriving with 8 camera licenses. You can even bolt on USB cameras and more onto this device and flesh out even a modest surveillance system with a bunch of client applications and more. The system itself also has lot of first-party applications for multimedia, for file handling, CMSs, but third-party CRMs as well, with a vast array of storage options as well, with the system supporting traditional RAID levels as well as ones equated to ZFS, things like RAID Z and triple parity RAID. You've also got snapshots there in the background. You've got cloud synchronization and cloud backups in Hybrid Backup Sync 3 and Hybrid Mount, allowing you to bolt on cloud storage with the appearance of localization, and virtual JBOD that allows you to reverse things and push NAS storage towards other servers and the cloud as well. There are lots of cloud gateway options, along with things like BoxSafe that allow you to synchronize with G Suite and Office 365 on an account of relatable GUI way. That said, the applications inside do lend a lot more towards third-party support with things like word processing and things like Word documents and spreadsheets and stuff. There is no real intuitive application from QNAP inside for that. You're still going to have to use third-party apps. Luckily, you can add an add-on internally for Office 365 to open Word documents with Word within the QNAP, so not externally. And the same thing goes with Excel sheets and more with the word processing packages from Microsoft. We're going to be testing Plex Media Server, of course, inside this device, but it's worth highlighting there is a bunch of multimedia applications as well. Photo Station, Video Station, Music Station, Plex Media Server, MB. Then you've got QMaggie with AI photo recognition inside there. And of course, Multimedia Console, that single portal access point to see all of the multimedia applications, what they can access, what they can't access, and allow intelligent indexing. With handling of 4K and 1080p in multimedia and video, there's a lot to be said for this device. And the same architecture, the same amount of memory and CPU we did utilize on the TS-873AX in Plex, and it did do very, very well. So that is the software side of things. Let's talk hardware. The front of the device here has got those 8 SATA bays there straight off the bat if we have a look. And if we see all 8 of them there, they are all lockable. There's keys included in the accessory box. And these drive trays are plastic in design. Bit of ventilation there on the front, not spring-loaded. But there are screw holes for 2.5-inch and 3.5-inch media, as well as the removable clips on the side to install drives whenever you need to. You don't have to fully populate the device. You can partially populate if you choose. And then from there, you can add drives as you need. Just make sure you create the right kind of storage allocation in like thick versus thin and stuff like that. We've got LEDs both all the way along the front there and at the top for real-time information about the system status, network connectivity, the internal NVMEs, and USB connectivity, as well as individual LEDs for those drives. I'm not sure we have an LCD panel here. Normally by now, if there was an LCD, there'd be a control. This may be a system that does not have the LCD. Hopefully the screen should have told us the prompt at the beginning. And on the bottom there, we have got that lovely USB port there. Now that USB port is USB 3.2 Gen 2, so a 10 gigabit connected port there. Very useful indeed for much, much faster backups. And again, doesn't have to be used for just storage. You can attach lots of network peripherals, such as that 5 GBE to USB adapter, and lots of other devices to that, but I would recommend utilizing it as a fast-acting USB backup, maybe taking advantage of an external NVMe drive, which again gives you those speeds in the thousands and allows a much, much faster one-touch click backup for this system. There's ventilation on the side there. We've got ventilation on one side. ventilation on the sub. Not a huge amount, but definitely more than enough for this. And with tons of ventilation without the light going nuts on the base of the system under each of those core drives, and a little bit there on the side where the CPU, memory, and NVMEs live. If we look at the rear of the device and bring that to a point where the light doesn't want to ruin this for everyone, we can see two giant fans there on the rear of the device. Those two fans there can be, adjusted manually in terms of their RPM because of noise, but I would recommend leaving them automatic so they can adjust and maintain the efficiency of the core system. On top of that, those two fans there are accompanied by a further fan over here, which is a CPU fan over the core components for, file management and that CPU and the important stuff there. There's a PSU at the corner there, which is a 250 watt PSU at the top. Again, internal. I know a number of you are for and against internal PSUs. I think in this system it's big enough it has to be internal. And in terms of network and USB connectivity, we have further USB ports there with a couple more USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports there at 10 gig and an additional USB-C port there at the bottom that's USB 3.2 Gen 1. Weirdly, that's the C port. I don't understand that at all. And again, this doesn't have HDMI out. QNAP have been, again, a little bit more restrained in their connection in this and where they're utilizing that core CPU and its lanes. But you can install a low-level heatsink graphics card. There are a few supported cards in some ports, and I think this is one of those systems that will support a few of those cards. Check the compatibility list, and that will allow you to create a kind of KVM setup if you use one of the small cards that are supported. There's also a couple of 2.5 GBE network ports there, and that is definitely worth talking about. Those two network ports there, 2.5 GBE in network connectivity. So again, you're paying for a device that is priced at 1 GBE with 2 times 2.5 GBE there. So again, if you're utilizing failover or load balancing, you're still around, you get 2.5 GBE max, but with link aggregation or port trunking, you can get up to 5 GBE or over 500 megs per second. Now, a number of you would argue that 2.5 GBE still hasn't really skyrocketed on the hardware scene. Understandably so, a few routers and switches have arrived with it on board, but it's been a very slow integration. I would argue that the fact that you're getting 2.5 GBE at the same price as 1 GBE and the fact that these are backwards compatible to 1 GBE means you are losing nothing and gaining plenty. At the top here, very interestingly, we've got two PCIe upgrade slots. Now, these slots are both PCIe Gen 3 times 4, so each. So it's 4,000 megs connectivity between the card and the core system for each of those. You can use those for a wide range of QM2 upgrade cards. Again, you can go ahead with 10 GBE cards. You can go for cards that are combo cards. They've done a new generation of them as well that actually perform a great deal better with a larger rating of PCIe generation on them. And with this card, for example, we've got two NVMe slots inside for NVMe storage to be added with a 10 GBE connection. And again, they have got a PCIe Gen 3 times 4 card out there that's a combo card to take advantage of, and a 3 times 8. But the good thing about them being separate ports as opposed to one PCIe Gen 3 times 8 slot as seen on the rack mount solution or on the Synology, the DS1821, the result is that you can use one of these for network upgrade cards and one of these for, say, SSD upgrades or for a Wi-Fi 6 card or for improved internal performance or to create a tiered storage system. It allows you to take advantage of two cards and fulfill those individual 4,000 megabytes per second bandwidths in a way that a single card times 8 is just, you haven't got the potential to do. Sorry about noise at the background with roadworks happening just behind me there. Now, internally, we can talk a little bit. Again, we've already mentioned that CPU, which is doing very well at the moment on the modern generation of NAS. But next to that, we've got that memory with a single 8 gig module inside, DDR4 2400 megahertz, non-ECC memory, although the system does support ECC memory. It's an optional purchase. And given that it can be upgraded to 64 gig, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this system proves itself that it can take advantage of that 64 gig comfortably. But alongside both the CPU and the memory are two M2 NVMe slots inside. Those NVMe slots that are inside allow you to install PCIe Gen 3 NVMe SSDs. Now you can use those for caching, so utilizing their fast performance, high IOPS and low latency towards the larger capacity, more affordable but slower RAID array, and on more commonly accessed files can then see the benefits with quicker access as they are copied over to the area of cache on the SSDs. Although I will highlight that the QNAP is a system that allows you to use those for both a storage pool or caching. You can use those SSDs, RAID them together or independently, and create storage pools for raw, faster access in the 4 figures. However, bear in mind that once again, this is another example of QNAP being a little bit more mature about this. In order to make sure that all the other services take advantage of the PCIe lanes available and allow the PCIe slots at the rear to be as good as they can be, the 2 NVMe slots inside are PCIe Gen 3 × 1 each. That means that each slot can only provide up to 1000 megs. So even when you put in an SSD, you might be going for like an a Pcie CUDA 520 or a 510 even, or you want to go for a WD SN750, something like that. When you install those SSDs, they might say they can do 3,500 megs per second, but each one of those M2 slots is going to cap out at 1000. So do bear that in mind when taking advantage of the system. But still, nonetheless, it's still great to have that RAID-enabled storage pool option on those, and will still give you, 13, 14, 1500 megs. And of course, we're going to bench test the performance of those NVMEs alongside those as well. And remember, you can also take advantage of Q-Tier. We don't really talk about Q-Tier enough on this channel. Q-Tier looks at the available storage in hard drives and SSDs and then creates a super storage block that is made up of, say, hard drives and SSDs. And rather than copying them in 2 locations, which is kind of the case of caching, it looks at the frequency of files being accessed and then moves storage along to a more priority and fast acting area as frequency is increased. And if you install SATA SSDs inside here, along with the NVMEs and SATA hard drives, with that triple tier storage system, you can go ahead and have a cold, warm and hot area of storage internally, with the NAS component and the NAS CPU deciding which one your data should live on automatically and moving them as needed. Let's take a look inside this device. Let's get that lid off of here and take a look at the arrangement inside now. Right, so let's remove this outer casing. We've removed that metal outside there. Pop that there. We can have a little look about the inside, and it's actually quite clean setup. If we have a look, first and foremost, we can see inside there the main drop down there of those bays. Plenty of ventilation there. We can see a nice clear view of those fans, certainly. We've also got the PSU there at the top, that large brick PSU there at the top at 250. But yes, a huge amount of clarity through the system in terms of ventilation throughout the whole chassis. But what we really want to see is that storage area there. So if we have a look there at the top, we can see a nice little layout of storage across the whole system. So first and foremost, let's bring that closer to camera. We've got a big old heatsink here, and that is where our Ryzen processor lives, the V1500B. On the side here, we've got the 2 SODIMM slots. As you can see, there is a stick of memory. It's Kingston DDR4 memory inside there. So again, we'll try and get that model ID, CBD260D4S9E1ME. I know, catchy name, right? If we have a look also inside at the top and bottom there, we have got an M2 slot there and an M2 slot at the bottom. And those M2 slots there will allow you to install those SSDs nice and easily. That's where we're going to be popping them later on the next video. We've also got a dedicated area of flash memory there. That's where the OS lives. And remember, this has both QTS and QUTS Hero inside. And if you have a look just at the back there, you can see that additional fan there. Try and get the, there we go, right there. And that is that dedicated fan there that's just for all of those hardware components that are inside there. On the other side, of course, there are our 2 PCIe slots right there. And again, both of those slots can be occupied one by one or both together with different cards, and really let you upgrade your storage throughout the system's lifetime. So what do we think of this device on the hardware level? We're of course going to be doing a software review and taking a good look at QUTS Hero on this device coming soon. What do I like? Well, First and foremost, I like, as mentioned, how mature QNAP have been about this solution, particularly compared with more OTT ones that we've seen previously. So when we look at this system, we don't see loads of ports, but the ones that there are there, every single one counts, from the 2.5 GBE to the USB 3.2 Gen 2 to the PCIe Gen 3 x 4 slots, 2 of them, to the 2 NVMe slots inside and up to 64 gig of memory. This is a very thoughtful device. It has clearly been marked that these are the things that have to be hit. And unlike some releases from QNAP in the past, where they've gone a little bit off kilter and included something that might have been a tad experimental, this is very, very solid ground for the brand to be working on right now. What am I less keen on? Well, I've got to say first and foremost, I'm a little underwhelmed by the NVMe's. PCIe Gen 3 x 1 is a little disappointing. I'm sure that's there for a reason. Like, if they could go higher than that, they could. When we've seen the XT series, for example, we've seen 3 x 2 and we've seen 3 x 4, so 2000 and 4000 respectively. So unless there's something I'm not seeing here, when we looked at the 973AX that had 10 GBE and U2 ports, there must be something factored into this system. Maybe it is the 8 storage bays, something that is drawing away from those PCIe lanes and therefore restricting these M2s to 1000 megs each. The system has 3 years of warranty, which I'm quite happy with. Again, you can extend that to 5 years if you choose. The system even arrives in the accessory box with pretty much everything you're going to need. There's the mains cable. There's one single Cat5e cable, but I can't even really rag on them for that because Cat5e and 2.5 GBE is fine. Keys. You've even got heat sinks for the M2s inside. They've gone just included that extra little layer, and it's a metal heat sink as well. It isn't just the thermal kind of disposable pads there as well. So again, it's a decent enough core system inside there. I find it very hard to critique this device because it's, again, one of the most, deliberate products that QNAP brought out for a long time. Even the fact that it includes QUTS Hero is still impressive, and the fact that this 8-bay arrives at the same price, give or take about 70 nicker depending on where you are in the world, with the Synology DS1821 Plus, and still arrives with the exact same architecture and more, so 2.5 GBE over 1 GBE, USB 3.2 Gen 2 versus Gen 1, M2 NVMe for caching and storage, not just caching, 8 bays, same CPU, ZFS 8 gig by default. This seems to bring a lot to the party, and I'm going to be very interested to see how this lands with the NAS buying public. Again, I think I can see there's a lack of LCD, which I'm less keen on. I've always been a fan of an LCD panel to give some real-time information about IP locations and temps. But overall, got to say, I'm pretty happy with this device. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, go into the description. There's a much fuller review down there to make your way through. And again, in the next few days or so, I am going to be running tests on increased memory with Crucial and Kingston modules. I'm going to be looking at the maximum performance of a couple of PCIe Gen 3 SSDs in those M2 slots to see what this device can do. We're going to do a full QTS overview of this device, looking at what the software can and cannot do, particularly with those memory upgrades as well. And we're going to be running our software performance tests of things like virtual machines and, of course, Plex Media Server. So do stay tuned for those. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Click like if you have, and subscribe if you want to learn more. Visit the links in the description to NAS Compares and the review, as well as the free advice section at the bottom of every single page, where if you have a question about getting the right solution for you, just go down there and ask me a question via the free advice section. It's not going to be the quickest response. It's manned just by myself, but it's free and it's impartial advice for home and business users alike. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.